Today, let's talk solar panels. These products are getting more popular in residential communities. The legislature had to pass a law just last session, Senate Bill 1626, to restrict the right of developers to limit installation of solar panels on their residential developments. Under this bill, the property code was amended to say developers could only limit the installation of solar panels if the development was 50 units or less. Clearly, more people are interested in installing these on their properties. You need to be aware, however, that many solar panels are leased property, and some leases require the owner to buy his energy from a particular provider. When a buyer purchases a home with solar panels, the solar panels are not necessarily part of the sale unless specifically identified as a non-realty item. The panels retain their personal property nature and can be removed by the seller. On the flip side, just because the panels are installed on the property, the seller cannot assume that the buyer will accept the obligations of the solar panel lease. The other day we had a transaction where the seller just assumed the solar panels stayed with the property he was selling. The buyer didn't want the panels, but more particularly did not want to be burdened with the agreement to use the particular energy servicer. Seller argued the panels were part of the property and that the buyer knew they were there and therefore had to accept the property with the panels. On the other hand, according to the lease agreement for the panels, there were three options for the seller. 1, buyer retained the panels and signed an assignment of the lease. 2, seller moved the panels to their new home and continued to pay on the lease. Or 3, the lease terminated and the seller paid an early termination fee. The lease was a 20-year lease. Buyer refused to sign the assignment. Seller argued buyer was in default. In my opinion, the buyer was not in default. There was nothing in the contract that said the panels were part of the property as defined in paragraph 2 of the contract. Also, the panels were not part of the real estate, as evidenced by the fact that they could be uninstalled and moved. The contract never made mention of a lease agreement, and arguably, if the lease did go with the property, the seller was in default, because under paragraph 10b2, it states, if the property is subject to any lease to which seller is a party, seller shall deliver buyer copies of the lease. Seller was stuck with the lease and penalties of early termination. You may find this same situation on a property you have listed or are purchasing. Address this issue up front to resolve any potential disputes. Allegiance Title is here to serve you. We ask that you give us a chance to see you at the closing table. Thank you.